Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 25th meeting of the Policy Committee. I will start with a roll call, starting with Mr. Schultz.
Daniel Schultz, present.
Leah Mulhern, present.
Zachary Epps, present.
Charles Burdell Williams, present.
And Jennifer Lowman, present.
Pam
and
present.
Thank you, Pam. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 28th, 2025 Policy Committee meeting?
So moved. Zachary Epps.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Please, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. I will hand it over to you now, Mr. Diazio.
Sure, we have 8 items on old business. Probably get through these fairly quickly. I don't think we'll start with volunteers. No changes since the first reading, except in the AR. There was a question the last time we met regarding clarifying the direct services language for purposes of TB testing. So I did have an opportunity to talk with Mrs. Savage, and we confirmed that overnight volunteers do require the TB test. So it's a one-time examination. Anybody 10 hours or more of direct services, and we consider overnight chaperones to be included in that direct services category. And I think we discussed that previously, and we were just going to confirm.
Thank you, Mr. Diazio.
And this is just a clarifying question. Were there any actual changes to the policy itself?
No, I don't.
Okay.
So, no.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board?
Just thanking you for clarifying that very explicitly, what direct service is.
Yep.
And we know this has been an item of confusion for some time. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public, either in person or online?
It does look like a hands up.
Can she be
Keith?
unmuted?
Yeah,
Keith, can you,
one person with a hand up. You want me to allow them to talk?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hi, Sarah, you can speak now.
Hi, can you guys see me, or is it just like a voice behind the screen?
To us, it's just a voice emanating from the ceiling, actually.
It's like the Great Oz. I love it. Okay, let me see here. So my name is Sarah Nutt. I live in Glenside, the Glenside section of Cheltenham. I've been a resident here for, I don't know, 11 years maybe. And I had actually emailed the board back in 2022. I'm sure y'all do not remember this because that was quite a long time ago. But my question, and I guess it never really got answered. And then I heard that there was some changes to the policy being potentially made. And so I just wanted to tune in and kind of see what was going on to let you guys know. My initial email, I'm just going to read it because it was, I still agree with what I wrote. I said that I would like to ask the board to reconsider and eventually remove the requirement that volunteers are required to undergo TB testing for, and I realized just now you guys were talking about overnight chaperones. I'm just talking about during the daytime, field trips, things like that. And while I fully support and understand the necessity of background checks, child abuse clearances, and safety, I feel that the TB screening may be an outdated requirement that should be reconsidered. I work as an ICU nurse at Penn Medicine. My hospital no longer requires TB screening. I work with active TB patients from time to time, and we still are not required to have the screening. My husband works as a physical therapist at Jefferson Einstein. He also no longer requires this testing. And I have spoken with friends in neighboring school districts, including Abington, Upper Dublin, Springfield, and the School District of Philadelphia, who have told me, this is just parents, that they were never required to do the TB screening as well. To me, this feels like, on the one hand, Dr. Scriven and the rest of our board is very, very much focused on community involvement and seeking input from these constituents, like asking for advisory panels, things like that. And yet it's incredibly difficult to just spend some time in our children's classrooms. And the TB screening is expensive. It's a two-step process. There are very real fears around needles that people have. And as soon as they see that, they're like, nope, I'm out. I'm not going on this field trip. I'm not coming in to volunteer for something. It's not worth it. And I just feel like, I don't know, I would love for parents who maybe otherwise cannot participate in school events. Like they could at least go on a field trip with their kindergartner to a farm, but they can't because the access to getting the background testing is so extensive. 2 years ago, I stepped onto the PTO board of PAWS for Glenside, and my role was family engagement. I really feel passionate about involving our families in the schools, and I think COVID really severed that connection. And it's been a slow. I know I'm probably at my 5-minute limit. I apologize.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm about to,
Okay.
step in here.
So ma'am, thank you for the comments. If I'll just add for purposes of the committee and the public, this administrative regulation actually clarifies the TB test requirement. TB tests are required by state regulations for any volunteers who provide 10 hours per week or more, or have interaction with kids 10 hours per week or more. Most volunteers don't reach that threshold. Going on your kids' field trip to the farm, for example, spending a day in the classroom when you come in and read. It's very uncommon to have 10 hours per week of volunteer service. That's the only time the TB testing is going to be required once this policy provision is made. So it's overnight volunteers and those who spend 10 hours per week or more having direct contact with kids. And that's what's required by state code.
Okay, so that's effective. That doesn't go into effect until this policy has been voted on. Is that like, so for parents who want to potentially get clearances for the rest of the school year, for a day trip, would they still need to do the TB testing?
Well, the policy is going to be voted on in less
April?
than 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Less
okay.
than 2 weeks.
Okay,
Yeah.
And these are rights, these are administrative
Yeah.
regulations,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, so these don't actually technically need to be voted on. So,
okay,
So as a point of clarity, I was just approved as a volunteer last month. I did not take a TB, this is Zachary Epps, member of the board. I did not take a TB test as part of the procedure, and I was approved. And so as Mr. Diazzo mentioned, hopefully this is clarifying what the rule already says. And so unfortunately, some folks have been getting TB tests when you did not need to get a TB test to chaperone a trip. And so it's unfortunate that a lot of folks maybe have been in that situation. But if you apply to be a volunteer today, to be a chaperone for a field trip, you do not have to do a TB test.
okay. So there are various documents that have been floating around on the Cheltenham website over time, various PDFs and things that are like quick guide to volunteer clearances, that really make it. I mean, I've pored over them for years, and it was never that wasn't clear to me or anybody at Glenside. So would I get in touch with like Kevin Kaufman if I find something that is kind of stating you do need TB testing, like just so that everybody is clear?
Hi, my name is Siobhan Savage, and I'm the assistant superintendent. My office actually handles the volunteer packets and the volunteer requests. So part of what has gone on is I started on July 1st, and I actually requested that the volunteer policy be put on the policy committee agenda because I realized that the policy, the AR, and the documents on the website are more restrictive than state law.
Okay.
So after the board actually approves the policy at the next hybrid legislative meeting. My administrative assistant and I will actually be taking the volunteer website down and putting a new one up with new forms
Fantastic.
and
Okay.
new directions based upon what's in this AR and also the new policy. We just wanted to make sure that we were clarifying for our community what was actually required. We're going to also update the forms, and we hope to make some of this process electronic so that people don't have to scan and email forms to us or drop packets off. So there will likely be a larger overhaul by the end of April, but we needed to follow appropriate process because we wanted to make sure that the governing body, which is the board, actually looked at this before we did anything else.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ms. Savage. I was at the Glenside meeting a couple weeks ago when you showed up, and it was a wonderful time. We really appreciate you. I just have one more quick question about policy, if that's okay, regarding the volunteer. And then I can hop off. I know you guys have lots of other things to do. In the past, a Bear Store is one of our PBIS rewards programs at Glenside where parents come in for 30 minutes. That was always a quick and easy because we did not need clearances. But and STEM Day as well, we didn't need clearances because our understanding was that if you were not left alone with a student, direct supervision, you didn't need to be cleared. The communication that the parents are getting from Dr. Robinson and from the PAWS Executive Board is that is changed and no longer can you do that. So we are running this PBIS Bear Store multiple times a week, and we barely have any volunteers. But I don't. I'm not sure.
Can you hear me? I
Yes,
might
I can.
actually interject here in a second, and Dr. Savage, would you mind if she speaks with you directly?
Oh, absolutely.
Is that okay?
Okay. Yep. Thank you. I'll email you.
Okay.
Thank you so
It's
much, guys.
Savage at cheltenham.org.
I got it. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Is there anyone else online?
No.
Any other board member questions or comments? All right, thanks. All right, Mr. Biasio.
All right, next is 219, which is the student complaint process. And we've not made any changes since last month.
Are there any questions from the board? Any questions from the public, either here or online?
No, there's no hands up.
Mr. Diazio, I just have a complete mental block about this policy. I know that it had to be changed. Was it related to the Title IX changes?
Yeah, so we, this was one that was, this is the 2016 review date, if I recall. So this was just a routine, this was part of our routine updating. And we, if I recall correctly, there was an attachment here that was outdated that we removed, and we made sure that the confidentiality, the retaliation, all of those provisions that are part of any complaint process were consistent with the other complaint processes, most of which we have recently looked at because of the Title IX changes.
Okay, thank you. I just think I don't remember.
Yep.
This one. Mr. Schultz?
I'll just ask for some clarification on just the one word and phrase. The one change that jumps out at me is directly and materially affect the student's participation, because that makes it more restrictive of what kinds of actions can be complained about in the context of this policy. And I was just, what are examples of not direct but non-material, or indirect but material? Because this is now two conditions.
So this is not meant to be the student complaint process because the food in the cafeteria doesn't taste good.
Right.
Or because the teacher gives too much homework, right? So it's a policy that students are supposed to be able to invoke when something has happened, when we talk about directly and materially affects their participation in school or an activity. So you disagree with how, to participate in a given activity, you need a 3.0 GPA, and you don't agree with how your GPA was calculated. You believe that it was calculated in error. And because of the potential miscalculation, you weren't able to participate, right? Direct and material. You were denied the ability to walk in graduation because you didn't have enough credits and you don't believe that that was correct. Direct and material. It's meant to address more significant things that students would encounter where they feel they're missing out on a piece of school or an activity because of how policy or school rules have been applied to them, not just gripes about schools.
Thank you. That's very helpful. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Diazio. Any other questions, comments? All right, I'm good.
We talked about this a little bit. If a student wants to complain about those things, I think we have other policies that relate to grading and all sorts of things like that. And so I recall this being very particular to these types of, this level of complaint. So I do appreciate you bringing it. Thank you.
Okay, so next is 237. 237 is the personal electronics devices policy. This was a 2017 policy. It was up for a routine review. There were no substantive changes to this policy. There was some cleanup. There was one item. We did clarify that the way this policy is written is there are certain minimum requirements that apply to all students in all levels using their electronic devices. So you can't use them to break the law. You can't use them to break policy. You can't use them to cheat. You can't use them in bathrooms, in restrooms. All of those things apply to everyone. Building principals under this policy are also given the ability to regulate the use of electronic devices in their building, because the thought being what might be appropriate in a high school might not be appropriate in a middle school, might not be appropriate in an elementary school. We simply added clarification that regulation of the use could include possible storage or safekeeping of devices if a principal or wanted to say, we're going to collect the devices at the beginning of the day, or we're going to make you put them in a pouch, or we're going to somehow else store them or safekeep them during the day. Not inconsistent with the current practice, but we added that clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Diazio. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything, Ms. Henry? I want to forget about you. All right, Mr. Schultz.
I'll just throw out that I know that, and this is mostly because it's on the record, and use of cell phones specifically has been an issue brought up by community members over a lot of time. And my understanding is that this policy as written provides our district the flexibility to impose whatever cultural changes and improvements we may want to make. The policy is not itself the mechanism to make those changes at this stage. Is that a fair statement? In other words, the policy as presented right now is all that is needed to allow potential future changes.
Sure.
Based on
Correct.
analysis and feedback from the community over time.
Correct.
That's all. Thank you.
Any other board questions, comments? Any questions or comments from the public?
Yeah.
Could you just state your name and where you live in the district?
I'm Katie Gwynn, and I live in Park. I have 2 children in the school district. And this is the policy that we came here tonight to ask about and kind of explore. Many of you probably know about the national movement based on a book by Jonathan Haidt to decrease phone and concerns about our kids, especially our teenagers, overuse of social media, phones during school time. Like specifically, he makes a bigger case for phones in every part of life, but the book in general asks schools to restrict phone use during time. My daughter is a 9th grader, and I know that there's no longer than 10 minutes that she's not on her phone because we regulate it. So during instruction time, it's an acceptable practice to be on your phone. She's taking AP classes and soaring through them. It's not the case that I'm making that he's failing academically, but I'm concerned about the culture. I think having the phones out throughout the day increases the anxiety, the ability that you're missing out on something, the social media pressures, the mental health. There's huge increases in mental health issues, and that's the case that he's making in the book, that our youth and our teenagers aren't growing up interacting with real people. They're interacting to these huge platforms. It's not just a one-on-one interaction where I can see you're disappointed in me. It's I'm posting to 1,000 followers, and what's my action gonna happen? This is like their lives all the time, and their brains are still developing, right? So I'm hoping that our schools can do better at restricting at least the time when they're in school to be able to focus and grow in social interactions. Ideally, they're saying, phone-free day. And for high schoolers, I don't think that's a reasonable ask right now. But I would like to be a part of a group that explores phone storage during instructional time. The minimal ask that they can have them in between classes, they can have them at lunch, they can have them obviously in before and after activities. But during instruction times, that it wouldn't be acceptable to be like, what's the answer? And then here's a picture of me on social media, which is the culture right now. And I don't think that's acceptable for a learning environment. And it seems like all the nearby school districts, high schools have made these policies in the past year. Abington, Springfield, Jenkintown. They all in the past year to two, maybe as part of this national movement, have instituted some type of phone storage in the classroom during instructional time. I think the biggest, I've been polling the community on Facebook, it's obviously not a read of the whole community, but it seems like the strongest opposition is about safety and parents being able to reach their children in case of an emergency. And the emergency, I think, is coded for unsafe situation at school, such as a school shooting. But most of the data shows that having a child talking with their parents is going to make the situation more difficult and more risky for the child and for the school to organize a safe action. It might make the parent feel better to be with their child in that situation, but it's not going to help the safety of the child. But that's the only reason that I've had this pushback for why they wouldn't want to store them in case of emergency. I'm not sure having the phone would help. You should be able to call the school if someone is tragically hurt outside the school. They should be able to come in and get the kid very easily. But if there's an emergency inside the school, there's no reason that would help to have a phone. And especially if most schools have instituted a phone locker that's in the classroom. So the student can get the phone even if there was an unsafe situation. I think that needs to happen in our district, and I don't know why we're waiting. I know that there's a PA state act that all public school districts can get $100,000 to institute phone lockers. And so that money is available to us. I think there's also caveats, you can get that money for other things. I don't know if our school district has accessed that money for other things. Mental health, you don't have to just use it for phone lockers, but the state designated it for phone storage specifically. They can be fancy where they magnetically lock them and they have to have the yonder things, or they can be like a shoe storage rack where they're numbered and you get your phone when you leave. And I think there'll always be kids that don't follow it, and that's up to the teacher whether they want to enforce it or not, just like chewing gum or cursing, whatever else the rules are, right? So a teacher may or may not enforce it, and there's always going to be kids that don't. But I feel strongly that we should push to have that culture of expectation that your phone isn't a part of your instructional time. So that's what I came to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm in 100% agreement with her, except I feel that a phone ban should go
Could you
for.
actually,
Oh,
I'm sorry, state your name and where you live in the
My name
district.
is Ashley. I live in Glenside. I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old that attend Glenside Elementary.
What's your last name, Ashley?
Lee, Lee. I agree with everything that she said. You summed it up absolutely perfectly. I do personally feel that a phone ban should go a step further and that children shouldn't have access to it at any point in the day. Children, like teenagers, I guess, the middle school and the high school. I have a friend that works in the New York City public school system. He's a 10th grade English teacher essentially. And I guess the city gave individual schools the option on how to implement some sort of the phone restrictions on students. And so his particular high school that he works at implemented essentially full-day ban. Kids have no access to their phones. They put them in like a locker at the start of the school day. They get it back at the end of the day. Sorry, my mom's calling me. And he said that, I guess that it started in September when the school year started. And he said the difference this year with the students from this year compared to last year and all the prior years when they didn't have that is just, he says, night and day. And it's just a no-brainer that like every school should be willing to implement this on some level for the benefit of the students. And the schools that have undertaken the full day benefit, the governor of New York State has became very interested in this. And now she's moving for a statewide ban, not even giving school districts the option to implement whatever they choose, wherever they see as best for their school or community. She's advocating for an outright ban, and it's probably going to pass in the state and for understandable reasons. And I just can't, like, I am a responsible and I have my phone next to me while I'm working all day. Even myself, it's hard to like not pick up my phone every now and then and I have a lot of self-control. I'm a 43-year-old woman. An adolescent teenager that's 15, 16 years old, like they're straight up addicted to their phones. Every parent that I speak to that has a child of that age is like they're constantly, and it's TikTok and it's things that are like real quick, and their attention span has like gone to crap. Essentially, they struggle to even get through like a paragraph without having to read it multiple times. And by not having phones in school at all, like if that also helps them break their addiction for like a 9-hour period of not being tethered to their phone. Like if you're a teacher, how do you compete with that? If you have students in your class that are like, you know, waiting for their next fix, you know, pulling out their phone and texting their friends, and that's just my opinion. My kids are young, but I'm hoping that by the time they get to, you know, middle school, that there'll be some sort of huge change and that they won't have to deal with that or even have that option to have their phone in school.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. Is there any members of the public online?
Yes, but no hands are up.
Wait. I'm
There are
sorry.
members online.
Oh, you
There
said
are
are there
members-
members online?
Yeah.
Oh, I heard just
Yeah, they're-
with their hands
Yes.
up. And then I'm like, wait.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Oh, please.
I guess I was just gonna clip this Leah Mohern. I don't know if we were saying our names earlier. I don't know. I guess I just, in terms of now that AR, the policy is clear, like where the delegation of responsibility is more explicitly for each school exploring options. So I guess for the greater good and for community members that may watch this later or are listening now, a path forward for advocacy would be directly to school principals and or central administration, I guess is my question, just so people know what to, yes to both or.
Yes to both. What we did do this past summer is try to make a little bit more consistent the implementation of this policy and this AR, of course, prior to these changes, by normalizing what was in the student handbooks and reiterating to principals that enforcement is key. But the issue that we are seeing, particularly at the high school level, is just the sheer volume of students with very high-tech phones. So this is not a situation where we are seeing students that are coming into classrooms with flip phones that only make phone calls, right? Like they are literally carrying little computers, they are accessing our networks. And in terms of, you know, making sure that students are not accessing them during, you know, class time, it can be incredibly difficult. I can tell you though, that in certain programs in the district, like for example, the EPIC program, students do actually use a pocket system where they're expected to put their phones in a pocket before they go into the classroom, and we have seen some efficacy in that pilot. So there could be larger conversation, and I really believe that as a district, we will be talking more about this with all of our principals over the summer.
Thank you, Ms. Savage. Anecdotally, I have a child who has several classes where they stick it in a door, a shoe
Yeah.
over the door and,
Cause Cedar Brook definitely,
well, yeah, this is the high school I'm talking about. Half of her teachers do it. PBL, a lot of classes do it.
Definitely a
It wo-
PBL.
I mean, it works. Yeah.
and I
Have to
think
do
we
it.
have to be more consistent about it. And if
Yes.
we're gonna set
That's a
a
norm.
school-wide norm or expectation, we need to be clear about that. But we also need to provide teachers with the actual thing that they're storing the phones in, because some teachers have taken it upon themselves.
Yeah.
And we wanna make sure that we're equitable in that.
Thank you.
Can I have a comment?
I'm gonna do the board and I'll get back to you. Mr. Rose?
Yep, so, just calling out, this is something, again, we're gonna be talking about AI a little later. This is something that we're gonna have to constantly revisit, right? Because as our watches get more sophisticated, they can take pictures, leave audio, like that. And so as technology advances pretty quickly, this is a conversation that I'm gonna be having continually. And, it's also an area where the board, we're talking about student use of personal electronic devices, which is also an area where the board can think about modeling the way. I recently came across some areas that the board is banning use of cell phones during their meetings and committee meetings by members. So it's something that, you talk about students, and it's something that impacts everybody. And so we don't have to stop at students. We can consider how to even model the way in some ways. Understanding that we use devices to access like our policies and things like that.
Kill a lot more
But
trees.
we have to be prepared for other ways, right? So, it's
Violation of my
it's an option.
sustainability.
Yeah. It's an option to think about.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Mr. Schultz?
So, and following up on my earlier question around whether this policy enables the changes we may want to see, I guess the other side of that question is, do other districts that have more aggressive approaches to limiting access to personal devices have more direct controls in their policies? So, right, again, because I know there's a fine line between implementation of classroom environment, but also some of these policies are about the guidelines that, as a district, we want to codify the expectations of that. So that's, I guess, a question for you, Mr. Diazio,
Yeah.
directly,
Yeah.
not suggesting we make changes today on that,
So
along
I
those
think-
lines, but.
I think some districts, some of the very local districts that have tried to take a stronger approach this year, probably, my guess, without having looked at them all, is that they may not have updated policy in advance, because I think the policy probably would have given them the ability to move forward. I think on the back end, and I think the folks from the public even commented on this, some of this more aggressive prohibition against phones in buildings is new. This year, a lot of school districts locally are trying that this year. As I've heard anecdotally that those districts want to get through this year, take a look back, get feedback, what worked, what didn't work. I think you'll see policy change on the back end. I am working with one school district now in a very public process where they are making changes to policy. They have started to implement some more restrictions under this type of language, but they are taking it sort of to the next level. And they are putting additional restrictions in policy. So I think a lot of times it starts with this language, and then you try different things. And when you find something that works, then you codify it as the new default.
That makes a lot of sense. It's an approach.
I think the other thing to really elevate is the fact that it's not just this policy that governs how we approach and consequence students for inappropriate use of technology, because obviously, like policy 218 and the disciplinary matrix, there is language in here already around inappropriate use of electronic devices in violation of that acceptable use of technology policy. So sometimes these policies and these ARs are intertwining, and at the school level, the principals and their teams actually recognize and understand how to implement these policies, particularly when you have someone that is egregious with, cell phone use or using the cell phone for inappropriate use.
Thank you.
Any other? Pam, or Ms. Henry?
Yes, thank you. This certainly has been an ongoing conversation for several years, and we've seen districts, across the US, some that have banned and some that are in the space that we're in. I'm glad to hear not only that parents are having these conversations, but what I would like to hear more about is a partnership between parents and the school district around whatever policies are implemented, because these are devices that parents are giving to their kids to bring to school. And so it's kind of hard for a school district to police totally on their own without that partnership from parents throughout this entire process. So I want to interject that more into these conversations, particularly about cell phone devices and other devices. And as we've all indicated, they're getting more and more sophisticated. And so, I want to have conversations about what does, parental restrictions look like during the school day and things like that. So as things are, as policies are coming about, we're not taking a, one-sided approach to how to really navigate this very, very tricky conversation. Because as we know, with some parents who feel very strongly on one side, there are other parents who feel very strongly on the other side. So this is not an easy situation to navigate, but I think the conversation as it is has to continue, and we have to, make whatever changes and adjustments that that are necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. Any online members of the public with their hands up?
No, none at this time.
Thank you. I had a couple thoughts, comments, sort of all over the place on this one. I think I had mentioned this before to Dr. Skirvin, but I have a friend who's a teacher in a district in Chester County, and he said that his district sort of instituted a no cell phone policy gradually by actually introducing it at the elementary schools first. So they set the expectation that no phones during the school day for little ones. None, zero. Goes in the basket, and that's where it stays, and when you go home, you get it back. Then they moved it to the middle school, and now they have it at the high school, and it's been in place at the high school now for a couple of years. And he said it's made a huge difference. The kids know absolutely what the expectation is. It's the norm. No phones out at all during the school day. That's just the way they go. And he said they've seen so much more interaction between the kids. Kids bring cards to lunch now, and they play Uno, and they do like they do things together face to face that don't involve just phones. So he feels, he felt pretty strongly that it was really positive. The other thing was, keep talking about, I was in Germany a couple weeks ago. I was visiting high schools and primary schools in Germany, and we visited this large high school gymnasium at about 1,300 students, 5th to 12th or 13th grade. I didn't see one cell phone out, not one. And we were there for about 3 hours. I finally turned to the headmaster and I said, "What do you guys like? Is that like where are the cell phones? Is cell phones not a thing in Germany?" And he was like, "We just instituted this year a no cell phone during the school day policy." So just this year. And it's been very positive. He said, after a few kinks initially, and we have kind of a graduated thing. If I see it out, I call the kid's parent, I talk to the kid, and I see it again, I talk to the kid's parents. But he said it's been really very positively received after sort of the first initial grumblings by students. So I just put that out there. It's not just us. It's, countries across the world that are trying to deal with this issue. And trying to figure out the best way to kind of grapple with it. I mean, as Ms. Henry noted, this has been an ongoing issue. I'm just thinking back to probably about 12 years ago. There were students who protested an attempt by the high school principal at that time to institute a no cell phone policy during the school day by doing a sit-in in the hallways of the high school.
I remember that.
You remember that? So this has swung all over the place for us. This has been a civil rights issue for some of our students. They feel like their right to free expression is being taken away if they don't have their cell phones during the day. This has been, but then we have other students who agree, we don't want it, it's too distracting, we'd be happy not to have it during the school day. So I think this also has to take it to sort of account, sort of trying to get a gauge on where our students are at this. And I suspect Dr. Skirvin probably talks to his advisory group about this, or may at some point. But also, how are our staff and faculty feeling about this too? Do they want stronger guidance from the board so that it's easier for them to say, no cell phones? Do they like the flexibility to be able to say, okay, actually, we're gonna use this during a class period. It's okay for you to take it out, which they could do now under our policy. So I'm just curious about sort of how staff and faculty feel about this as well. All right, any other thoughts, comments, or move on? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I think there is a movement for adults as well. Mr. Epps, I was reading about the pouches. They were starting to have them at musical events and Broadway shows. Where you check your phone because you have a better experience, right? And Ms. Henry, I do appreciate the push for families, because that's, you know, making it more acceptable to not have a phone until you're 12 or not have a phone until you're 16 will make just the culture easier. For all parents as well, because that's where they manipulate us, because everyone has a phone. So I remember like in kindergarten, kids had smartphones. You know, it's like, so if there's more of a culture of this is what's acceptable, just like this is the age of driving, or this is the age of drinking, this is the age, you know, of course there's gonna be kids that do it outside those boundaries, but this is like what's acceptable. I think that parents being involved is really helpful. But I know myself and many other parents that have contacted the principal directly, and we haven't gotten anything except to go to the school board. I know that the principals deal with a lot, and I feel like if we can't come to codify it in the school board policy, teachers have a lot on their plates. I think it's one more thing for them to have to be a pushback against the students, unless there's a district-wide push to say this is what we're doing, this is what you have to do. Of course, everyone, you know, have how they work it out, but I feel like there does need to be more ways that parents that have these complaints can get involved if the principals are telling us to come to the school board and the school board is saying go to the principal. I have contacted the PTO as well, and I have contacted the teachers union, but haven't gotten too many. How can we support you as teachers? How can we, you know, I know one teacher that has the phone pouches that charges the phone, universal chargers, and I imagine those are very expensive, but then the students like putting them there.
Exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we're gonna continue this conversation, but I appreciate you both coming here this evening.
We'll probably excuse ourselves, but thank you for listening.
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to stay. For
Please come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Street going.
I know.
Public participation.
So I think we're on to number 6.
Yeah.
So 6 is 202, only changes to the policy here. This was one we just looked at not too long ago. We added language here at the end that if a student is found not to be qualifying as a resident student, they are entitled to due process as outlined in the regulations. And there's some modified language in the regulations which talk about the steps here that the school district has to go through when a student is found not to be a resident of the district. This is taken directly from new state law that went into effect within the last year or so, which basically states that before a child's removed from the district's roles as a non-resident, you have to give them either a hearing or have a court order or go through the homeless evaluation process.
Thank you, Mr. Diazio. Any comments or questions from the board? Ms. Henry? Any comments? Well, we lost our in-person audience. Any comments or questions from anyone online?
No.
All right, well, I think we're good to move on then.
Great. Next is policy 200. The changes here were to the regulations. Yeah, we removed the language. It's related to policy 202. There was language in policy 200 regarding withdrawal from school or disenrollment from school on the basis of non-residency. That language was deleted And now it's where it should be in 202.
Thank you, Mr. Diazio. Any questions or comments from the board?
Oh, and we had also built in the change of address procedures, which was a student services request that we actually put in our policy that when you move within the district asks that you update your address information.
Makes sense. Any questions, comments, anyone online?
No.
All right, well, sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Diazio. Number 8.
Policy 005. The main change here was there was previously language about vacancies in officer positions and removal of officers from the board. There was a court case, I believe it was out of, I want to say Reading, but let me check here. Jim Thorpe, where, as I understand, there was you're a board president or a board vice president or treasurer, some officer of the board, and they were removed in the middle of their 1-year term, and it was actually litigated. And the court there held that once you are selected for an officer position, you have a property right in that position for that term. And if you are going to be removed, you are entitled to at least a hearing.
And back pay.
And that's the language that applies. So officers of the board may only be removed after notification of the reason and an opportunity for a hearing. It doesn't mean you can or can't do it. It just means that if you're going to do it, you have to follow the rules.
Thank you, Mr. Diazio. Any questions or comments from board members? Mr. Schultz?
Could you scroll to the top under order? That section is confusing to me because it sounds like it's direct contradiction of the first section of order. First section describes how the temporary president is selected. It's by seniority. If there's equal seniority, then they can make a decision.
The first piece is to call the meeting to order.
Okay.
And then the first item of business should be to elect a temporary president.
Okay.
So you first have somebody to call to order.
We went through this in December.
You already talked to this.
No.
No,
I think
no,
we went through this in
okay.
December when it was like. who-
No, we didn't. We elected a president. The temporary president
There
oversaw.
there should be the appointment of a temporary president who then takes care of until the president is selected. And that's usually not the person that opens the meeting. Usually the reorganization meeting gets opened. And the first thing that the board should do is elect a temporary president, generally to call for a vote on the president, and then the president takes over. Procedurally, that's the way.
So then the last 5 words of that first section sure makes it sound to me like that's describing how to determine the temporary president.
Oh, yeah, it should, okay, I think I agree with you. So,
Very much.
yeah, so I agree with you that these 5 words should be taken out.
Okay.
And I think we can do that at the second reading level.
Okay, great.
So let's make that change. Yep.
Glad I didn't
No, it's a good
work
catch.
another 4-month cycle on this. I had a second question, which was around, but I'll let you.
Go ahead.
The other appointments, school physician and school dentist were struck. Does that mean those roles no longer exist, or that they're filled in a different way?
No, they're actually required to exist. The reason they were taken out is because they're actually required that you have them. So it's not shall have the authority to appoint those individuals. And there are other policies in the 200 series that talk about the school dentist and the school physician. Yep.
And then just making sure that the numbering will end up being.
It will, when the two, and it should.
Sounds-
Yep.
Thanks, that was all.
Any other questions for board members? Any from the public? No. We're good to move on.
304 is the employee resignations policy. There were some recommended language updates from PSBA just to make crystal clear that once you submit your resignation, the superintendent has the authority to accept it. Here, we know that those items get placed as informational items on the board agenda, but there was some case law. There was a case that was litigated where there was a question as to whether or not the resignation had actually been accepted. And so we took the language that PSBA suggested and placed it in the policy. In the AR, we added some language around what has to be in your notice of resignation. So it has to be in writing, it has to be submitted to HR, the timelines, the notice that you have to give are all outlined there.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Do you have any questions or comments by the board? Any questions, comments from anyone online? No questions, comments. I just had a question. Will this then, assuming that we adopt the policy, be incorporated in our, like, should we have an employee handbook or something like that? Like, how do folks know that this is what they will?
Yeah, so a lot of times they would get policies that apply to employees. Do they have to like acknowledge them electronically when they sign, when they come on board?
No, we don't do that right now, other than the requirements for employment.
Okay.
We do have,
It would be a policy that we'd have to push it out to the staff.
We do have a employee handbook that was updated about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago.
I'm not even sure that's still, we don't even have copies to share with employees when we hire them. We go over policies for staff once a year. But it's something that we could probably
Put it to the school level handbooks.
or we could easily do with new hires, just as they have to go in and complete the criminal checks and the child abuse checks. They also have to go in and complete the child abuse,
Sexual
sexual harassment.
acceptable use.
We can add policies that we want them to review as well.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious because I actually just resigned a job myself and I went to our employee handbook because I wasn't really sure what to do. And there was specific language about what I was supposed to say anyways, but.
The 300 series of the policy manual really serves the purpose of being the manual,
Okay.
right? That's the intention of it. That the policies in the 300 series are the policies that apply to employees. So if you had a question about resignation, board docs is where you would go. Or your collective bargaining agreement. That's why our policies usually state, to the extent that this policy conflicts with the collective bargaining agreement, the collective bargaining agreement always overrides a contrary policy.
Thank you. Any questions?
The last one for old business is 240, the foreign exchange students policy, and we talked about this one previously. I don't think we've had any changes since the last meeting.
Any comments or questions from the board? Questions from anybody online?
No, nothing from anyone online.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bianca.
All right, so now in new business, I think we wanted to start with 832 if we could, because I think we have Ms. Keen online here. So this is a new policy, opioid antagonist, and the nurses report up to Ms. Keen in student services. So this is a new policy that gives the district the ability to have stock doses of opioid antagonists to assist in an emergency. That's already happening, but this policy was recommended to clarify and to codify the rules, the steps that you have to take if it's used, storage requirements, all of those things. So this is largely a PSBA recommended policy. Ms. Keen reviewed it to make sure that it's consistent with current practice. And it would be a new policy here in Cheltenham, but not a new practice.
I don't believe she's actually online.
Oh, okay,
No,
okay.
that's why we have Siobhan here.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bianca. Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board?
Just mine was already answered. That was really, if this is reflecting what we're doing, if it's coming from state requirements. And obviously, this is a conversation that hopefully we're not having too in depth in terms of opioid use in our schools, but something we have to be prepared for. So, and I appreciate the context that was shared. And again, the due diligence of our staff to be already prepared, already have things in practice that we then have to catch up to in terms of policy.
Yeah, I second that as well. I appreciate the fact that this is being spelled out now, even though it's unfortunate that we have to have policy. Comments or questions from the board? Is there anyone online?
No, yeah, no hands up, no questions.
All right, so 903 is the public participation in board meetings policy. There's been a fair amount there's been some litigation around First Amendment issues, rights to speak at public comment in school board meetings over the last number of years. There was a revised policy recommendation that PSBA suggested that school districts consider. So we took that policy. Our policy had been updated not too long ago, but the PSBA template was a little bit more comprehensive, and I thought that the headings actually under guidelines were helpful in making this policy a little bit more easy to read and be a little bit more user-friendly. There is a note in here that the board, we can make a recommendation to the full board, but how many minutes you want to have. I think right now we're operating under a 5-minute rule. There was a question about whether that's the right number, so we left that blank. The committee can make the recommendation to keep that duration in or to modify it. And there's also language in here that states that if public comment needs to be deferred or a time period, you need to set 90 minutes for the public comment. This policy gives you the authority to do that.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah,
before I
I'm going
open
to
this
scroll
up
to the
everyone
top
else?
here. Go ahead.
Are we replacing, we're replacing the public participation in board
Correct.
meetings with this public
Correct.
comment in board meetings?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, just one, regarding the minute stretch, our previous policy had the 5-minute guideline with language that would allow the chair to modify that as appropriate based on the context. So, for example, at the hearing, I think we knew that that might be a large number of comments, so we wanted to lower it to 3 minutes to make sure everyone had an opportunity to speak. Does this allow for that type of modification in a specific context or not?
I believe it does.
I'm sorry, I tried to read it closely, but
So the comments can be deferred to the next meeting
Right.
if there's not enough time. I believe that there's language in here to address that. So just give me a second.
it'd be under maybe
The
that.
presiding
that-
officer or designee shall have the authority to, it's that middle.
Yeah, so limiting the total or per speaker time for public comment as it's deemed appropriate. Yep.
Okay, thank you. That is actually probably the exact same.
Yep.
My other question was around speech that is profane. Is there a legal definition of what profane is and isn't somewhere? Or is it one of those, you know it when you see it?
No, there is a definition, and we could, we can look to add that if that would be helpful. To make a note.
I second that. That was
I think
my
that's a
first
good-
sentence. I
Yeah.
think that's very vague.
And
That
Ed,
was all.
quick question, in terms of, the time for public comment, is there sort of a standard in Montgomery County or the folks that you represent? And if it's not, like, what do you usually say?
I would say almost every public entity I work with is either 3 minutes or 4 minutes. I can't think of anyone that's got a 2-minute policy, and I would not recommend 2 minutes.
Mhm.
I'm not aware of anyone else, but I'm sure there are some that have 5 minutes. I don't know that anyone is more than 5 minutes.
Okay.
3 and 4 is standard.
Standard. And so is this something before this goes for final approval, we need to, as a board, make a decision on what that should be?
Yeah, and I think whatever you recommend at first reading, if you were to change that at second reading, in my mind, that would be a material change. So if you recommend 5 minutes and then you come back after first reading and say, let's change it to 3 minutes, I do believe that would constitute a change that would require a new first reading.
Mr. Schultz.
Oh, no, although I've been seeing mumblings of 3 being a suggestion, that was all.
Mr. Epps.
Yeah, no, I don't know how far we can deliberate or propose during this time, but, I definitely would support 3 minutes, as well, but I had a question, and we'll formally propose that.
Yep.
But I had a question around the deferral of public comment, because I couldn't think of any time that would come into play, but is that like if a meeting is going and we started it and then want to stop it, or like legally, can we not have public comment at all at a meeting?
So the public has a right to comment anytime before the board votes on something. So that's why your first public comment is on all agenda items. So if you have, 20 people that sign up and want to come talk about an item on the agenda, you really have to allow that public comment period to happen. You can set a limit and say, well, there's 50 people in the room here. We're going to do this. We're going to have a 2-hour comment.
Ed, I don't know if you can hear me, but you went on mute somehow. It just automatically happened. You didn't touch anything. It just went on mute. I can't hear you, anybody in the room now.
Now, with second public comment, though, second public comment is generally unrelated to an item that's on the board agenda. So if you have 100 people show up for second public comment and it's getting late and there's nothing that the board's going to act on, you can end the meeting because the folks that didn't get an opportunity to talk then would have an opportunity at the beginning of the next meeting if in fact the board was going to vote on something at the next meeting or in the second public comment at the next meeting. So you just have to make sure that before you take a vote on something, you've offered a reasonable comment period. It doesn't necessarily mean that if every person in your township showed up and wanted to speak on an agenda item, the law does not require you to allow everyone to speak, but you have to have a reasonable comment period to hear the public.
Got it. That makes sense.
And what would be the applicable way for us to gauge where the board is around the timing for the public comment, the 3 or 4 minutes? Is that something that Dan and I should like reach out individually to people and kind of gauge?
I mean, you have 6 people here. I think this committee is going to make a recommendation to the full board.
Okay.
And that's the purpose of the public meeting here, is to deliberate it.
All right, then I'm gonna go around and ask everybody. Mr. Schultz?
3 minutes is fine with me. The township's using that.
Yeah, that's correct. Township uses a 3-minute period as well.
Ms. Mulhern?
3 is also fine with me.
Mr. Epps?
Yep.
3?
Sure.
Mr. Godell Williams?
I will also support 3 minutes.
Right, Ms. Henry?
6 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. 3 minutes is fine with me.
Go back to the all-night meetings. Go back to the all-night meetings.
So I'm assuming 3 for you. I actually, having been someone who's given board testimony before, I tend to err on the longer side. I would probably prefer 4. I mean, I actually kind of like 5. I like to be able to say to people, look how good we are, what a great school district we are. We give everyone lots of opportunities to speak. We have a 5-minute window. But I mean, certainly if everybody else would like 3, I would refer to that, but I kind of err on the longer side.
One other thing to keep in mind is that, and I don't know, Ms. Lowman, that it would change your opinion, but the 3 minutes applies to both the first comment and the second comment period.
Okay.
So my guess is that when the 5-minute limit was in place, may have been a time when there was only 1 comment period. I don't recall exactly when the district started breaking out public comment into 2 sections, but whatever number of minutes you list here, someone could come and speak at the beginning on an agenda item and at the end on anything they want. So any individual member could get 6 minutes if they were coming to speak on at least 1 agenda item.
I think, yeah, that's fine. Thank you for the explanation.
And it can always be revisited if it's not working.
Yeah, I've just seen, my one real experience is in Philadelphia, and I've seen their speaker time get more and more constricted every year. It's down to 2 minutes per speaker now, unless you're a student. Students get 3 minutes still. But it's 2, and I've given testimony, and it is not enough time. So I just kind of put that out there. That's always my concern, is that we sort of we kind of back into like some of this, and I just want to make sure that we still, have, because it's not like we're flooded with speakers, like, I mean, I understand why they do it in Philadelphia. They have like 85 people who want to speak, potentially, or 100 or whatever it might be. So, I don't know. But yeah, okay, that's just my thoughts about that.
Ms. Lemon.
Oh,
Just will add that the fact that we have language that would allow in a heavy comment period meeting, the chair to lower it to 3, to me makes it potentially still logistically feasible to have a 4 or even a 5.
Can you show me
That's
again
the
where that would be?
That's, I think,
Number 6.
6 under the presiding officer. There's examples provided, and one of them is.
Oh, I see. I see. Oh, I got you. Okay.
So just throwing that out there.
And you can interpret that language to also mean, presumably, that you could, when it says waive the rules, you could also vote if you've got like a hearing topic, right? you could allow for more as well. So either way.
Yeah, I get it. I'm fine with 3. I mean,
I'm fine with 4. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
wanted to put that out there
Yeah.
too, not to be waffling, but.
I was gonna say the same thing as Mr. Schultz in terms of I would be fine with 4 as well.
I would, then I would go for 4.
Stick to 3. All right, let's.
What, yeah, we go adjust it as needed.
Mhm.
And the other question I had about this is that this time limit obviously would apply to all board meetings.
Correct.
Okay.
Including committee.
Including
tonight.
committee
Yeah.
meetings like tonight, yeah.
And the committees have always been
Pretty
more
loose.
relaxed and
Right.
conversational, right? And that's just inherent with committee structure.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
No,
I-
No, yes, sir. No, that's right. No judgment.
All right, no, I'm glad that we're kind of revisiting this one. I know it was sort of time a little bit. I know we have been very, very fortunate in this district not to have faced some of the really challenging public meeting issues that other districts have faced, but I think it's important to, look at this again in light of what other people have learned from those experiences. Oh, Mr. Schultz.
Sorry, item 1 under individuals' public comment may be interrupted. And it lists sexual harassment, racial, ethnic, religious, or nationality intimidation. There are other forms of intimidation and harassment that are not listed there. Is that language that is prescribed by state code or case law, or could we
I will
add it?
check.
Okay.
Yeah, I will bring
And
that.
the one that jumps to immediate mind is gender or sexual orientation based harassment.
Or disability.
Or disability, yeah. I mean, the list could go on.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a way for us to add some form of catch-all without going too far, but food for thought for future reading.
Let's see what our existing policy says. Let's see. I'll look into that.
Mhm.
All right. We ready to move on? All right, so the next 4 items, one of the things we tried to do with this agenda, we have tobacco and controlled substances policies in the student section of the manual and the employee section of the manual. They were last revised in 2019, 2021, 2024, and 2022, all different times. And they all had like minor differences in terminology. Sometimes we were calling it tobacco, sometimes we were calling it tobacco and nicotine, sometimes we were calling it vaping products, sometimes it was electronic cigarettes. So we decided to take all 4 policies and try to standardize the language. So that's what you're going to see in the next 4 items. The rules have really not changed, right? Tobacco and controlled substances are not permitted in schools. So I'll bring these up here and we'll start with 223. And the way in which these definitions are written currently are based on PSBA's most recent recommendations from 2024. This is their most recent template policy language.
Any comments, questions from the board?
It's here as well.
Do students even smoke cigarettes anymore?
Yes, they do.
They do.
It's a tangent, but there's still a whole marketing.
Mr. Gansdale, I have a question around 223 in particular, because this is specific to nicotine. But we have students that have been caught vaping marijuana.
That's under 227. That's gonna be the next one.
But does it, and 227 specifically names vaping?
Correct.
Okay. We've had some hoops to jump through around that this year.
One of the big problems is not knowing exactly what's in a vape. Is it a nicotine-based vape? Is it THC-based vape? Is it something
Oh, we
else?
typically find the boxes, so we know what's in them.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at 227 actually, I sort of jumped over that, but I don't actually, I'm very well could be missing this. Maybe it's in the AR. I saw
So-
THC, but
So the paraphernalia would be those would be the devices, right? And if we go down to, where's the definition? Any controlled substance prohibited by federal, state law. So that would include marijuana, still prohibited under federal law.
And I think there was another reference, because I saw the marijuana language specifically and the reference
223.
to the substance control policy, because it was different. It was around the vaping language. Is it where guidance? Yeah, I think it's that one. Wait, no.
like that's.
Yeah. Oh, medical marijuana.
So this prevents the marijuana-based vapes between the two of them, tobacco, nicotine-based vapes, the actual vaping devices, all of those things would be included between these two policies.
So Ed, quick question is, why wouldn't these policies be combined? I know like this says, and this may just be the way the regulations are required, but 227 is controlled substances. 223 is tobacco, and vaping products.
Yep.
Is the remedy the same for both the both of them? I'm still like looking over both of them.
No, the consequences are different in 227 than they are in 223.
Okay.
That's probably
The biggest, okay, I got it.
Yeah, we have, well,
the tobacco
Tobacco is
violations
legal.
also don't get reported
to the police,
to
Got
to
you.
PDE
right,
or
or anything
safe
like that.
schools report
Yeah.
and controlled substances. would.
Controlled substances are usually things that are just blatantly illegal.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Thank you for the clarification.
Ms. Savage, would it be helpful to you for this, the policy 227 to specifically reference vaping? I know that it's covered under paraphernalia potentially, but if I were a parent and I were to just sort of skim these policies or something like that, I would be like, okay, see, tobacco and vaping is, but like, what about, yeah. Because I mean, honestly, at least my experience in the high school, it's the marijuana vaping, that's the issue. It is.
I think it would be helpful because we have actually had to walk families through multiple policies to get to the end game around that. And it is one of the things that has popped up most for us because about 80% of our suspensions this year, and probably more towards 85% at this point in the year, have been around vaping. And it's not just tobacco. It's been vaping of all variety of things.
Yeah. Would there be a way to make that connection in 227? Make it clear that.
Oh, in 27. Okay. I'm in 23. Let's see.
I think the way that you would want to get at it is if you scroll down to your definition of drug paraphernalia, if we explicitly state there that it's all equipment, products, and materials of any kind, including vapes, which are used, intended for use, or designed for use, and all the rest of the definition.
You would put it, would you put it at the very end? Hold on, let's do it in real time.
Okay, so drug paraphernalia means all equipment, products, and materials of any kind, and then I will put a comma. And then I will put including vapes.
Here too.
Yeah, because it already, inhaling is there.
That's what.
Yeah, I think that would capture it.
Okay.
Because a vape is a way to inhale a controlled substance, which is marijuana. And even if it is legalized, it's only legalized for a certain portion of the
Right.
population, not necessarily for minors.
Okay. All right, so that's in 27, right? Yeah. Okay.
This is really semantics, but because the point of this is language consistency, like vapes, vaping products versus whatever, does that make a difference, or is that another area we need to be consistent across policy?
I think that's completely fair. So let me go back to 23. And really can't see it. Because they're new and I can't see.
Say vaping products.
Yeah, it just said vaping products. So instead of vapes, we can say vaping products.
Mr. Schultz?
When we're
Oh,
finished
wait,
with
sorry.
this, it's related to nicotine one. You ready for?
Oh, yeah.
I just had a clarification on, there's a section in the nicotine use that says, in the case of a student with a disability, this is the big green block above delegation of responsibility
In the policy, right?
in policy. Yes. And it was just unclear what that section was, what it was trying to say. And
That sounds like Safe Schools Act language.
it's in the case of a student with a disability, including a
Yeah, so when it's Safe Schools Act language, and when when students commit certain offenses on school property, as the board knows, there are certain items in the MOU with law enforcement that are mandatory reports. This policy clarifies, and under that MOU, when a student is a student with a disability and you're referring it to law enforcement, under the MOU, you're required to tell law enforcement that that student has a disability and any information that they would need to know when responding. This policy makes clear that for a student who has not yet been identified, but who's undergoing an evaluation, you treat that student as a student that's been identified. It's an additional safeguard so that students that are in the process of being evaluated, until a determination's made, you treat them as though they do have the disability.
thank you.
The other piece of it is around the state and federal laws and regulations. If a student does have an IEP or a 504 or something of the sort, they are required to have, they have certain protections. And we look at, you know, the number of suspensions, for example, to determine if a manifestation determination is required. We look at their entire historical record to try and figure out whether an IEP meeting should be convened so that we can adjust our behavior plans. But there is an additional layer of, support that goes with that when a student has an IEP.
Thank you. Just for clarity, because I don't like to make those assumptions, the manifestation declaration, that's actually tied to like if the behavior is manifestation of whatever condition they're experiencing, then which would trigger some of those safeguards that are in place that Mr. Diaz was talking about.
Well, actually, the manifestation, well, if it is a manifestation of a student's disability, then you would have to look at the IEP, determine whether it was appropriately implemented. And then from there, if it is a manifestation, you don't discipline the student first, right? But if it's not a manifestation, you look at the IEP, make sure that it was appropriately implemented, and then you move from there. But obviously, we take all of these things into consideration in any circumstance where we have something of this seriousness. Usually the high school principal called me and we talked through what those disciplinary issues could be, as well as like the fact pattern and the evidence.
Are there any other questions, comments, thoughts on either 223 or 227? Ms. Henry, anything? Down to 1 to 10.
We'll move on
Been
to.
down there for a while.
Man, low ratings.
Started strong.
Yeah.
So more TV.
It's never in our season 2 episodes.
And now we have 323 and 351. We are gutting 351 and replacing it with new language. That was the one, that one was more outdated in terms of terminology. We're changing it from drug-free workplace to controlled substance abuse. That's a title change there. So again, 323 and 351. Question, I'll flip around between the documents.
Any comments or questions from the board? Mr.
Yeah, sorry if we're hopping around a little bit, but this actually goes back a little bit. So not about this, but this goes back a little bit. Because under the guidance of the Department of Health, obviously, like marijuana is still a controlled substance federally, all sorts of things like that. But what came across my mind is that there are like reports of young children with seizures and things like that, where like there might be. I'm not a scientist, a doctor, but like there's developing research around those sorts of things. So I guess we would have to wait for others to say it's okay. And if we had this is totally hypothetical, but if we had a young student who actually was benefiting from some of those medicines, we would have to say no.
And I've come across this case. I can't say they've been here, but a lot of times, usually you have parent cooperation with those types of things because it's dedication to the students, you know, having at home. What we can do in those cases generally is release a child during the school day to the parent. Parent takes their child off school property and then they come back.
Awesome.
That is usually how that gets handled. And it's usually documented in a health plan. It's part of an IEP.
Yeah. Awesome. Marvelous.
I just had a question about the titles again of these things. So that the new title is controlled substance abuse, that applies to employees. Should that be just controlled substances?
Yeah, it probably should.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good recommendation. The committee agrees.
I don't I don't know if this is an issue or not, but, if we have employees who are found to be vaping.
I was thinking the same thing, because this doesn't mirror equity. Like the expectations we hold for students, we should have for employees as well. So how do we evidence that in this policy?
That would be what, 351, right?
Yes. It's not. You have drug place here as well.
That one's we're getting rid of. So we would have to, we could put that language in.
I'm sorry, you're in 351 now?
351.
Right.
So see right there where it says drug-free workplace?
Yeah.
So that's a definition in the new one, and then when you scroll down to the bottom in the guidelines, it does say we have to report. I'm just trying to find where that definition is used in. There you go. The district shall make a good faith effort to continue to maintain a drug-free workplace through implementation of this policy. And I think if you read that definition, it might capture it, because it drug-free for employees means you don't bring them, smoke them, use anything on any school district campus. So for this one, we might not have to name it as specifically. It just says use. Right. It says, it shouldn't say use and possession, right?
Use,
Yeah.
possession, dispensation, distribution. Sure. Yep.
It might not need to be as specific as this one. It's a broader net so that you can catch more, but I think the floor is, the floor is very high on this one.
Yeah.
You can't bring anything on campus at all. If you're an adult employee.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts, and questions about policy 323 or 351?
Question, and this is is it there? It may well be. I know that the student policies had language not just about campuses, but also off-campus events, buses, things along those lines. It was mirrored as well in the employee policies.
It says the site for performance of work.
Okay, there we go.
So, I mean, and anywhere you are with a child,
Mhm.
any bus depot, any
Right.
bus, any parking lot, any.
And we have the school property, school sponsored activity.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Oh, this one.
Is there, without me scrolling my phone for the next 5 minutes to try to find it, are there policies, I assume somewhere that apply to community members that are in our schools and are
I think
similar?
I think it's 904.
Thank you, I just want to know.
Yeah. that's
And does
a
that-
question.
I don't know if that one also has to be,
It's 904.
Okay.
It actually probably, it should be.
if they're
It
just in
actually
terms of
should be
mirroring.
updated and
or-
we can, yeah.
So that, thank you.
There's nothing wrong with it, but in the interest of having them all consistent.
That's
sure.
why I asked,
Yep.
because I figured there had
That's
to
a good
be
point.
one.
Yeah, it's a good
Thank
point. Okay, so. All right, 109. Yeah, skip 250, but let's just do 109 quickly. Because this was just a typo that someone communicated to Mr. Schultz and communicated it to me, so we corrected a typo.
What did they say?
in instead of ins.
So can I a little extra?
That's all,
From here.
I think
all-
it just said, it said is instead of yeah.
Oh.
Is instead of.
Is.
We had a pretty robust.
No. So that's an easy one, right? We're all good?
Yeah, that's good, although I have, oh. Mr. Schultz.
Not to leave a good typo correction unpunished. I have a question about the policy. Because I remember we did discuss this, and I also think this came up, so it might be a very quick answer, but the section around, this section, questions, materials, it sounds to me like literally anybody in the country could challenge our materials as written. And that struck me as, I think this was actually raised before. Now, it doesn't allow them to, but that would cause this to be invoked, and the assistant superintendent then has to respond. Do we have to do that? And should we tighten that up to say it has to be a member of our community in some way? It says the district recognizes the right of individuals.
Yeah.
With no restriction.
Can we?
I don't know if
Open
you
rights
can
request.
because, yeah, the right to know law.
Right.
But
I mean, anybody has
policy is
the right to complain about anything.
Right.
Anybody can file a right to know request. Anybody can send the assistant superintendent an email. There's no requirement as to what the response necessarily needs to be.
Though this does, I mean, why have this section at all if this is already covered by that sentiment?
I was actually gonna suggest, I know we didn't mean to open this up and we can table this for another meeting. I think that this, our policy,
I see what you're saying.
yeah, this policy kind of follows the original policy from the Pennsylvania School Librarians Association. They have an updated 109 policy.
More recent?
They do, yeah.
Because didn't we just do this?
Yeah, we should.
We did, but they have a different one. And I only know this because the library and stuff, but they actually now recommend having a specific process for reconsideration
Okay.
of materials.
Well, if the committee would like, we can bring this back.
And I can send that to you, Mr. Diaz.
Or we can make the change here and then also bring it back. Whatever the committee would like. I mean, it's totally acceptable.
I swear this wasn't my agenda. We can point out the typo. All right.
No good deed.
That's when I saw this, I was like, look, they get another chance to look at this.
No, yeah, I mean, it's here, but it can also, we can put it on the May agenda as well.
Yeah, we might want to do that. I'll send you what the PSLA has.
So let's hold it and not move it for a first reading.
Okay,
And we'll defer it to next agenda.
okay.
I was gonna make the same comment, just in, respecting the essence of the agenda, but also allowing ourselves the opportunity to review that in detail, take recommendations from the administration draft that reflects the items that we've been discussed, and also does continue to carry on the energy that Mr. Schultz brought regarding wanting to see this policy be looked at one way or another.
Let's do 250.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. Also, I mean, it's interesting given we think, oh, this can't happen here, but it just happened in Radnor,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there was a committee that banned 3 books from their library.
Fantastic. Okay.
They're good books. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were, yeah.
Oh.
I'm sure
I like
All the play.
All right, so
What'd you do,
Stop sharing?
Oh, you stopped sharing?
No, I didn't. Haven't figured it out. I don't use a Mac.
9 PM, you're doing it wrong.
So, okay, so 250 is policy on student recruitment. This was actually a gap in the manual that picked up just on a routine review. But I suspect that the attachment that's referenced in the AR will probably have to be built into our handbooks. So this is just a requirement with respect to the information that military recruiters get about students when they're in high school. And do we have military recruiters, Ms. Savage, that come to campus?
We do.
And we were just talking about, earlier today, we were talking about students that go into the service. So these rules track the federal laws that apply here, and they're cited in the legal references. So it's essentially, they get contact information that parents can opt out of. And there's an attachment that gets used to notify parents of that opportunity.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Just a point of clarity, because when I read it, I thought it was that the contact information would only be shared after permission is granted, but then it's secondly, we can share the information unless parents say not to.
Correct.
Okay,
Have to opt in to not share.
to not share, okay.
Yeah.
And that's just the requirement, or is
That's
that
correct.
discretion? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's an odd kind of
Yeah.
thing, but.
But I guess in theory it's for something good.
It's an old statute too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You were gonna look for the left.
I'm bleeding.
It's nothing new, put it that way.
Yeah, in fact, I definitely, this exists somewhere in this, something that like, I had to receive this form at some point.
Okay. Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
Or
Yeah, the
something
high
like
school
that.
actually does have something.
Yeah.
They do
I was
have.
gonna
something,
ask, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
But it's good to codify and put it into
Yeah.
the policy.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and that brings us to 8:15.
All of our questions are actually, I think 10 people just came back.
So this is our first look at an AI policy that I know the board had an update in Ed Affairs, right? An Ed Affairs update. And so now we're looking at policy. There's a PSBA recommended template that we used for part of this. Rachel and Siobhan had also collaborated, and their teams had worked together to really edit this, unique to Cheltenham practices. So this is not the template policy, just regurgitated. And whether or not this gets to a first reading, I don't know. I didn't have any expectation that it would or wouldn't. But we did want to just get it to the committee's attention because we know that it's been something that has been inquired about for a number of months now.
All right, I'm gonna open it up. Mr. Schultz.
I'll just start. She's on me. No, I'll just start with I'm not gonna like drill in right now, because I do kind of assume we probably won't have this go to first read, and I might offer some other thoughts more robustly written out to the chairs. One thing I did want to just flag though is the definition of open source AI is not what open source AI is. So we should either reflect on whether we need a definition of open source AI or take it out completely, but this makes it sound like open source AI is a tool that would incorporate the interaction with it into the product. That is not.
I need you to tell me what open source AI.
Open source AI is,
I'm gonna take some notes.
Sure.
Are you also able, like,
I can type stuff
type
up.
some of it up?
For sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Open source AI would be an AI model that is built using open source technologies and is potentially leveraging open source corpuses that have released their models publicly for use and experimentation.
Okay.
So it's not that when I type into the model, what are your thoughts on, the philosophy of Plato? It's now baking that query into the AI. It's that the numbers, the giant matrix that is powering its response is something that any of us could download and create our own copy of to ask locally without using that platform. So it's basically a publicly available a tool that they're hosting, and you could host yourself. That's I think the fastest way to describe open source AI. So in general, this idea of the interaction with it could expose data, I think that should be explored in the same way any technologies license would be, whether it's Google or ChatGPT. So I just wanted, that was one thought. I also, and I'll jump to another, but then I'll pause and other folks can weigh in. But there were some clauses in here under delegation of responsibility. This is actually more structural policy that I didn't understand why they were under delegation of responsibility versus something like guidelines or authority. Like, for instance, I don't know, the stuff around directing that these tools may only be used on district computer. It just felt like maybe there were some things that could be more clear in different sections. And also there was some language in here that was around, cover your butts clauses, like, shall not be responsible for the dissemination, replication, or alteration, shall not be responsible for any fees. In particular around the district shall not be responsible for the dissemination clause, and that's above definitions. That I read that and I was like, what? What is that? How do we say that because then the next sentence is, but also we're not limiting our obligations. So
Well, so we sort of do the same thing in 816 in our acceptable use of technology. This would mean that, like, if a student is utilizing some AI powered website and they make a purchase,
right,
while at school, we're not responsible for that purchase.
got it. That makes sense. The one above it though, where it's saying we're not, I guess, I assume, let's say a teacher enters a student's grades into a service, and then somehow those grades get sent out on social media by the service's marketing platform. We're still responsible for that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
That's the thing I wasn't really sure.
Not for students per se. Right?
Sure.
If a student
Right,
puts,
but or staff.
I see your point with staff.
So I guess all that is to say, I feel like, what is this clause doing? What is it trying to accomplish and why, versus making sure that we're using tools that adhere to privacy protection laws?
Like, I'm almost thinking of our field trips policy. Like, I believe that our field trips policy says the district does not have any responsibility for any trips that teachers go on, or that, because sometimes they advertise things like on their own if they're not sanctioned by the district and approved, right? I think the intent here, and maybe we need to clarify the language, is these are the rules that you have to follow as a staff member if you want to incorporate AI into your classroom. If you don't follow those rules, essentially you do so at your own risk. Yes, could someone come around and sue the school district for things that our staff did? Yes. I think that sentence though is intended to say that as a district, we're telling the staff member, you're doing that at your own risk, whatever consequences come from that. Maybe we are still, just because we say we're not responsible, doesn't mean that we're not responsible, but we're, right,
Sure.
because if our staff member does something, yes, we have potential liability, but that's the goal of that language, and maybe it needs to be tightened up and reworked.
And as we are trying to tighten up what we are actually prescribing and allowing both staff and students to use, not just for AI, but for all of our curriculum and materials purchases, for our online adaptive programming, for our software purchases, we wanted to make clear too that if we buy a wrapper, for example, a wrapper system, and someone strays outside of that and uses an AI platform that has not previously been approved by the district, then you are entering that at your own risk.
Right.
Because there's not a whole lot of ways that we can even limit access to that through the internet at this point, because they're everywhere. Like, they're everywhere. So just making sure that we are delineating and we are clear, I think is gonna be really important. And I know Mr. Diazio will help us with that language.
Hey, Ed, this is a joke, but I will say I was using some technology yesterday. It literally is a legal AI tool that will write in legalese. You could probably put all your questions in there and it would give you the perfect language. I'm just saying.
That is solicitor job protection clause.
You can call me after the meeting and I'll tell you what it is, Ed.
Good luck with that one. Come see me when it gets you in trouble.
Nice. I will, so I'll wrap by this high level for this policy. Wherever we can actually just use or point to our general technology use policies, I would encourage us to do so and really try to hone in on 815 is really about guidelines for the authenticity of use and efficacy of generative AI. And I know that also may eventually actually, like, I think this is probably one of those policies that in 5 years we find ourselves fusing back into one policy, but I understand it makes sense to have it separate right now. So
yeah, and it's a good point because you don't want two policies saying different things. And to this point, the reason we haven't had an AI policy in large part has been because we thought that 816 was doing what we needed it to do. And frankly, I still believe that it does. But what 815 can do is set out the philosophy for how much should we be welcoming this in. Once we welcome it in, then 816 really kicks in and governs. I'll leave it at that. But I hear what you're saying and I agree with it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Schlicht. Yeah, I agree. I think it was referenced, one of the things, we met with some math professors when we were in Germany, one who's studying the use of AI in math education. And he really talked about the three paradigms of AI in education, right? AI directed, learner as recipient, AI supported, learner as collaborator, and then he's working on AI empowered, right? Learner as leader, students know how to best use AI. And he feels like the new digital divide will be those who can collaborate with AI and those who can't. And that every person who can't work with AI will be replaced by someone who can. And so we had a lot of we had a lot of discussion about that, but I think that is for me the reason why we need this policy is really how to reach that third paradigm of AI empowered learners, and give our staff, our faculty, the guidance to make that happen. Because what they are most concerned about with the use of AI right now is that it's going to be used just as sort of babysitter for students, like go on and you can do some problems or you can kind of do this, but it's not they've worked with a lot of staff who they feel are not actually teaching students how to best interact with it. So I think that for us is our challenge really, is to figure out how to instruct our students, right, to have best interact and understand the use of AI and authentic problem solving ways. Anyway. And if anyone's interested, these people are looking for school districts to, people in Germany are looking for school districts to partner with them on this authentic use of AI in mathematics applications. They're working with some schools in New York and a school in Denver, I think. But happy to pass on the information. Oh, Mr. Ryan.
Yeah, thanks. Second, to appreciate the synergy, because even if I looked, I appreciate that, not just the regurgitation, you also, there were some things from the other fairs that aren't in here, and vice versa, so I appreciate the due diligence. A second, to the definitions, I'm not the person who will send you the correct language, but I did wonder, like, are there other terms we should add here? Are these the right terms? And then I did wonder, like, the accuracy of some of those, so I appreciate you raising that. And then, so in the policy, is very focused on educational opportunities. In the AR, some HR topics come up in terms of the use of AI and decision making and things like that. So I wonder what level needs to raise the policy because of it's so focused on educational opportunities for students, and then doesn't really say much about other. It says operational efficiency somewhere, but not in a clear way of what that means, how the district can use it or not related to HR. And I think that was it for me. Actually, no, that's not. There was one more piece, and this is, that doesn't really need to be answered right now, but, and this is in the AR, but I just wonder, right now it says like all grades will receive something at age appropriate level. Obviously there's some nuances baked into there because a kindergartner, what is age appropriate even has to be explored, possibly even to a certain extent. So just mentioning that now, I don't think there's an answer necessarily, but that's just an ongoing conversation. What does that look like that we've given ourselves? We shall provide all students at every grade level. Well, do we actually want to hold ourselves to that from the get-go?
Good question.
Mr. Sutton. So some of the, so I think the broad, I've been trying to synthesize the broad goal, I think, of this is it's touching on what tools to use, and the 815 is, and it looks like the AR is talking about how those tools may be used. I do wonder if we should be baking some of the restrictions into the policy in terms of what are we as a board saying are acceptable uses of generative AI. And so things that jumped out that I really appreciated are in the AR, are things around you cannot use an AI to make decisions regarding hiring and HR or grades. There are other things, though, that I don't think AI should be used to make decisions about. For instance, which students get to join a club if there's limited capacity, or I don't. You could come up with I won't brainstorm them all, but ultimately the idea that these models have inherent biases in their training sets, and they can help inform. They can act as an assistant to a human, but really the human is the one that needs to stay in control in our district. And I think that frame would also apply to the student uses, right? And in general, we want our students to be in control, and they can be assisted by AI. So
I think the two examples, and I know there's more, but I think the two examples that you gave could very well be policy statements.
Right.
I think one of the things that we were getting from some of the legal conversations that have switched back and forth was the advantage to having the AR versus the board policy is because of how quickly everything can move, that you can adjust things much more quickly. So like we were looking before at the agentic AI conversation, and then also the artificial generative AI. And sorry, apologies. So one of the things that's happening rather quickly is these there's sort of bots that are called agents, and that they are task automation. And so a lot of companies are starting to use these. And then you have artificial generative AI, which is the thing that is what everybody is warning people about, which is that it's able to do as complex as of a task as human beings, and with the emotional intelligence and all that sort of stuff. And so depending on who you ask, depending on what you look at, we're talking 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, where that sort of stuff is coming. And so we saw how quickly ChatGPT came out. And so that was why a lot of the advocacy has been around sort of like two-prong approach, that the policy pieces or the limitations happen more in the AR so that it could be adjusted more quickly in response to whatever kind of is coming. But then the same conversation, and I was wondering the same thing around some of the terminology that's in there and definitions, because that terminology, like I said, agentic AI or artificial generative AI, both of those aren't in there because they don't necessarily occur in schools yet. But
And I think that we can almost, I like looking at some of these and wondering where a less is more mentality might be used, might be relevant in terms of thinking about using this as a way of identifying our philosophies. A couple of like the scale feels like a very important and concrete thing that the AR should provide. There are some things in the AR that jumped out at me as maybe actually going against our other policies, or particularly around illegal use of generative AI shall be reported to appropriate legal authorities for possible prosecution, goes very much against my mentality of how we want to treat our kids. So I don't know if that should be, I mean, unless it's dictated by our other policies, but I wouldn't add that kind of thing to our AR here. Things along those lines. So if we tighten the scope of what we're trying to accomplish with this policy, we might end up being more effective with those concrete goals.
My other request or question, as you are considering what this policy in AR should look like, is maybe it's that you have an 815.1 that applies to students and then an 815.2 that applies to staff. Because I think we do have to delineate what the expectations are for adults versus children. Especially as you as a board are really articulating what your vision is for student learning, but also what our expectations are for employees and teachers to engage in this learning so that they can teach our students. Because there might be, some question around that, especially as we're opening professional development options up to teachers. And what exactly, how deep are we going? Are we training everybody? Because we want everybody to train all the kids. Like, what is that? I think it would be really helpful to us as an administration to understand what you think as a board around that piece.
And that piece, sorry to interject, but that piece of work, because that's what I left the Ed Affairs meeting wondering, to be honest. Like, are they looking for us for direction on how much to do? Are they ready to go and like, now we don't need y'all, we're gonna go, which is the policy.
We are ready to
So,
go.
yeah, right.
I'll go as far as you tell me to.
Well, that's how I'm understanding. Yeah, that's all.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions, ideas, musings?
Well, I guess I have, go on, yeah.
Yeah, mine's just a very general comment. I know that we, as a board, kind of started this conversation a little while ago, and I'm in the district in various ways. We're discussing it in a bunch of work, and again, just the gratitude around the agility that we are displaying by discussing AI in this way, and how, and Jenny, your 3 points from the folks. A great way to frame what we're considering, or how we should consider. And I think that is what I'm most encouraged behind. Again, just a comment, right? Because the why and the what, I think we've barely defined that. I think there's still a lot that we have to understand. It's growing for all of us. But the how, I'm really interested around, how I'm really interested in that. And I appreciate, Mr. Schultz's comments specifically related to the AR in a way, because I thought that the different levels of use would be a necessity for us. And I'm almost thinking like, that's almost a part of the AR, like by itself, like if that, thinking about dividing out and how do we chunk this out appropriately? And, that one stands out to me specifically. So I'm encouraged by the conversation. I think there's a lot to need to build on, and I have some reading to do. I definitely personally have some more reading to do, like I haven't been reading about it already, but, there's a lot there, and I just, again, could appreciate the continued work that we've, been tasked with, all individually, but also work perspective to get us here, and excited for where we go, for sure.
In terms of next step, what's the, so we can take these documents and would you like to, I don't wanna overcommit you, but I know you've got a lot of good feedback, like, do you wanna edit the documents? And like, this is just words on a page right now.
Could I propose maybe a sub task force of the policy committee? Because I don't want it to just be me.
Yep.
I'd love to be on that.
We're actually gonna start.
No.
We'll figure that out and we'll email everybody.
And it could be, do you want a stafflet designee too?
Would it make sense? I could see it going either way, where it might make sense for us to just have an initial conversation based on what's been presented to us, save you all some time and then circle back.
Yeah, I would, just as one board member, I think I would want to have the conversation just maybe with the subgroup to, and I guess my thought would be there to kind of filter out, some of the general aspects and bucket them in a way that we can address them systematically.
Yep.
That's, because I think there's a lot here and we should bucket it first in order to like kind of set folks up to be successful. That's my thought.
Sure.
All right, yeah, we will reach out to everybody and figure that out. Yeah. And I will say, I know we've seen this document before, but the US Department of Education, rest in peace, they're. Their document on artificial intelligence and the future of teaching and learning, that got a huge shout out from the folks in Germany. They were super impressed by it. They found it to be extremely useful. And I think that was also their sort of way of saying, don't let your Department of Ed disappear. But they did reference that document quite a bit, actually. And I know that we've seen it already. But all right, well, Zachary and I will get in touch and we'll figure out the next steps for the latest.
And I think our next meeting,
Yeah,
I think we discussed before the meeting, I think we do want to keep it as May 20th, which would be in coordination with Ed Affairs, because Ms. Savage and I were talking, and the items that I think we have on the agenda are field trips, curriculum development, promotion and retention, graduation requirements, GPA, and class rank. They're all Ed Affairs related, and the Ed team's been doing a lot of work and has some very targeted recommendations. So those topics seem to go well together. So if it's okay with the committee, I think we'll keep that date.
May 20th.
It'll be both Ed Affairs and policy. I think you'll have some agenda items that are just Ed Affairs. We'll do those first, and then we can break out into can end the Ed Affairs meeting, convene the policy committee meeting, and the topics will I think, flow naturally. We did the same thing last year with the homework policy.
All right, well, this has been a very productive and full
Yeah.
meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your input.
Significantly, how many?
So do I have a motion?
But now you
We're all-
have
I
to.
think we're all.
You have to, Dan. You have to.
Everyone just.
Sorry, Jenny's asking for
I
it.
need a motion to,
Dan,
It has to be the person
Drag us
who
on that
has
shower.
encouraged the most discussion.
to end the
I
meeting.
think we
I
should
didn't
write
say
that.
anything.
I think we should write that.
Whoever spoke the most,
Yeah.
said that.
Come on, in.
Just indulge.
I would, that's one more.
I can't do it. It's real.
Dan, indulgence. It's 2 words. So moved. Come on, so moved.
All
Fine.
right, so moved, Mr. App, second.
Here's your
chance. I mean,
Oh.
thank you, Ms. Maloney.